everyone, and welcome to You Are Medicine. Happy autumn. While fall isn't officially here since the equinox isn't until September 22nd, according to the lunar calendar, fall started in early August, believe it or not. In traditional Chinese medicine, what fall marks is the return of yin. Among other things, yin is the cool and the dark. Yin is the shadow and the mysterious. Yin is deep, like blood. If I'm beginning to spook you out, then you're getting the point of this podcast. It might be a bit early for Halloween, but August is what is called Ghost Month in many Asian countries, such as Taiwan, China, Vietnam, and Singapore. While in the West we are more familiar with Halloween and Dia de los Muertos in late autumn, the commemoration of spirits, souls, and ancestors begins in early autumn in Asia. I found this all very interesting as I contemplated the meaning of fall and ghosts from a traditional Chinese medicine or TCM perspective. So, on a spooky and rainy day in Taiwan, I called my friend Rosie to talk about Ghost Month and traditional Chinese medicine.
Let me close. I thought I could leave the door open, but it's like the rain is loud. I'll close the door. Okay. It's so
The
dark.
rain, the darkness, the rain, and the wind is such the perfect setting for our
I
conversation.
know, totally. Couldn't have orchestrated it better.
So since I talked to you, I'm like, how come I never heard of the Ghost Month in Vietnam, you know? And so I did some internet research and we have a Ghost Month too, but I just
I
never
saw
knew.
that. Yeah.
But you didn't know about it before you went to Taiwan either, right?
No. I mean, I heard about it only just by reading on the internet.
Oh, so you knew about it. See, I didn't even know about it.
Yeah, I did. I knew about it, but not from like family or tradition or just seeing it on the internet.
So what's it like there? What is it?
I think overtly, it's like it doesn't feel that different, but people will just say things like you can't do certain things right now. I think the main thing people talk about is like don't hang your laundry at night because ghosts will inhabit your clothes in the night. But then there are other things like you don't want to go swimming this month.
The ghosts pull you down under or something?
Well, because like, in Chinese cosmology, we're considered young. Like the living beings are considered young, and then the all the spirits and the ghosts are considered yin, right? So like in the water's yin. Right now, the gates have been opened, and so they're just out and about. So the nighttime and then the water are places that they inhabit right now. And my cousin-in-law, who I just saw last week, she lives like on the coast, like northeast coast, where a lot of people go. It's like a really beautiful area. But she said that it's very common this month. They'll just hear helicopters day after day after day, like all the time, rescuing people. Oh, actually, tomorrow is the actual ghost festival. So I don't know what's going to happen. Temples will have different, events, and I don't know what to call it, but it's supposed to be this whole month. It started with a new moon this month. So it's already been like a couple weeks or something like that. But
Yeah.
here, people make offerings to ancestors on a really regular basis. It's like you always know when the full moon and the new moon are because all over the streets, everyone is making offerings and burning paper money to ancestors on those days. So it's like a very regular thing. And then on different holidays, people will prepare a bunch of different foods for ancestor offerings and stuff like that. But this month in particular is not just for ancestors, the ancestors that you regularly make offerings to, but it's for orphaned ghosts. So it's like for ghosts who don't get taken care of in those ways regularly. So they're kind of welcome to inhabit our world and like partake. So the offerings during this time are different from regular times in that I've seen people prepare all sorts of different foods, like international cuisines. instead of, whatever normal Taiwanese food that people prepare, but it's like people prepare, French, Italian, like just like
Really?
yeah, 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 like sandwiches, hamburgers, because it's like for all the orphaned ghosts.
In the world, like kind of Taiwan, knowing that they can feast on this day. Wow,
I don't
that's
know.
so interesting.
It's like the regular burning paper money, but also like burning paper cars, and I've seen like paper cell phones and like all sorts of things. Just like taking care of all the orphaned ghosts right now.
What are orphaned ghosts?
The ones that don't get offerings normally, like with the ancestor offerings and stuff like that. The ghosts who aren't getting taken care of regularly in that way. They're welcomed to come during this time.
Huh.
Listening to Rosie talk about ghost orphans and the gates of the ghosts being open, it was hard for my mind not to create a cartoon-like movie about it, like Pixar's Coco about Dia de los Muertos or the ancestors in Disney's Mulan. There is, of course, the more rational and respectful part of my mind that speaks back to that part of my mind saying, it's not really literally like that, but I couldn't help it. I wanted Rosie to give me more detail to dispel or at least fill out what my mind was doing.
Wait, so question, is the belief literally, like people literally believe that you die and there's another dimension like Earth where if you burn paper money, they get money on the other side to be used in a way that we use it here? Or
I don't know if it's that literal, and no one's talked about it like that.
yeah,
But the paper money is definitely burned specifically to take care of ancestors,
right.
So the paper cars and the paper houses and all that stuff is specifically to take care of our ancestors. I don't know if they're literally in another realm, like driving around and like using them.
Okay, so that's probably not what's happening. It's probably impossible to know what's actually happening in a realm that we have no knowledge of. And yet, there does seem to be some communication, some bridge, some understood continued connection between us, the living, and those who have passed. I wondered how Rosie felt living in a culture that collectively acknowledges that connection.
Do you feel the ghosts? Like, what do you see? What do you feel?
I feel an increasing like yinness, which makes sense for the seasonal changes and everything. And when I started thinking about it, I was like, oh, it makes so much sense that it's at this time because it's almost a way to sort of like welcome in a more yin time. And I definitely feel it. Even though this is like my first changing of the seasons for the first time in Taiwan. So there's something that still feels like unfamiliar about it. Like I don't know when the rains are going to stop or what the rhythms of the seasons are in the way that the weather changes. But kind of like underneath that, I can still feel that there's an increasing yinness right now. And I think Ghost Month really amplifies it.
I feel like I can totally feel it. I think this is the first fall season where I felt fall so early on
Mm,
in the season, like I literally the day or two before what August 6th or 7th, before the lunar calendar fall, I could feel it. And then I'm feeling it more and more. And I think just because it's so somehow contrasted to the young of the year and the season, to how young it is, that I think that I've just been craving that feeling to come back of
uh-huh.
yin. So just really surprised how strong fall feels for me already.
Mm,
And I think the ghost month is very interesting to me is because it is at the beginning of fall, which I so associate ghosts with October, of course, October 31st, but also, Dia de los Muertos, which is for early November. And
uh-huh.
so that's later in the season, right? And so it's interesting that it's ushered in at this time, which I'd never heard before.
I think in general, being here, what I'm noticing is it's like a lot of things that I've told you before. I only notice in contrast to being at home because it feels so different. Because like at home, it just is just normal. But now coming here, I notice how different it is. So then it's just like a different experience. So then it brings something into awareness. But just how young dominant our way of being at home is, like how it's like that's what's seen and noticed and acknowledged. And then the yin is like it's like less and less important, acknowledged or cared for in all the different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's true here too, because of modernity and globalization and stuff like that, of course. But there's still ways that these traditions are being kept alive that it feels quite different. That there's a way that yin is acknowledged as being the mother of yang. That it's still acknowledged and respected and seen and valued and it's not just with Ghost Month, but it's just like in all the ways. It's the same thing as like you're not gonna have a good day unless you sleep the night before, right? So it's like something as simple as that. Well, you're
Right.
not our young existence, like this sort of visible life, isn't gonna be good unless we care for our ancestors and the spirits. It's the same exact thing.
I really like the analogy that Rosie made, reminding us of the inseparable connection and influence of yin yang. Taking care of yin to take care of yang. Sleeping at night, yin, to feel good energy during the day, yang. Taking care of your ancestors, yin, to have good descendants, us, yang. In a culture so steeped within the understanding of harmonize and yin-yang for balance and health, these rituals are a living practice and acknowledgement of fundamental principles. And it's not necessarily that the average person there steeped in these rituals are doing it in a conscious manner that they can explain like that, but perhaps it's more that the aliveness of the knowledge and rituals themselves are enacting itself upon the people.
I don't know for sure, but I can imagine that some people may be doing these traditions and rituals and sort of, I'm sure there are different levels of engaging with it. I can imagine that some people are engaging with it on a level of just it being sort of like a rote thing, like they learned this is just like a tradition that's being passed on or something like that. But still within that, I feel like there's still something that's being acknowledged, like sometimes when I'm at home, I'm in the city or something for months at a time. I don't know when the full moon and the new moon is because I'm not looking up at the sky or anything like that. And I'm living in a city now, so it's the same thing. Oftentimes I'm not seeing the moon, but walking on the streets, when the new moon and the full moon is because the ancestor offerings and burning of the money, it's like happening on a cyclical basis. So it's like you always know what's happening on the lunar cycle because of it. I feel like there's something to it. I mean, even just the following of the lunar calendar, that's like all yin. And in the West, it's like we hardly even know there's a lunar calendar.
Right, right. I think even in talking about ghosts and spirits and souls, maybe that there's, and I think I'm trying to understand different aspects of it too, actually, because I think here it's so not acknowledged. Like, it's like, do you believe in ghosts? Is the only conversation we have about that world, right? Do you believe in ghosts? But like, it's a realm of beings and existence. Beyond that, believing or not, there is a realm of existence that we have only scratched the surface of here, and very small pockets of people would even admit that they believe in it or acknowledge it. It's not even belief, right? It's acknowledging it. And I have always had a fascination with ghosts, as you know, because I have a history with being with ghosts and living in a haunted house. But aside from that, I'm always thinking about that realm. Also, because it's mentioned in Chinese medicine, but the modern schooling that I have about Chinese medicine definitely doesn't go into it. So we only have things like, oh, these are the 13 ghost points. Oh, it's some, connection to some time where blah, 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 but literally like a line about it or something. And it's always thought because we're just always trying to legitimize the medicine in Western mindset that I think there's a lot of effort to distance ourselves from things like that. And so the way that I was schooled in the medicine, it's intentionally to separate yourself from that world that is scientifically not valid, right?
Mhm.
But trying to go back and really understanding the roots of Chinese medicine, like I feel like I'm trying to understand what all these references are about.
You hear that,
That's
that
uh-huh.
sound?
Huh?
Did you hear that sound?
No, what? Stop. What sound?
No, I'm serious. There were like a few times it was like, you didn't hear that?
No, I don't even hear it when you do it. You're just making a face and a hand.
What?
What did you just do?
You don't hear that?
Very faintly. It doesn't sound like
While you were
anything.
talking, it was like 3 or 4 times.
What do you think? What is it? Did it sound like a computer thing or
I have no
a
idea.
router?
It didn't sound like
So
it didn't sound
weird.
like anything recognizable to me.
Huh, I didn't hear it at all on this part, but maybe when we play it back.
So, interestingly enough, I did hear it during playback. Did you hear that? And I don't know what it is. And I didn't hear it when I was talking. Here it is again.
But trying to go back and really understanding the roots of Chinese medicine, like I feel like I'm trying to understand what all these references are about.
It sounds like something is brushing up against a microphone, but both of our microphones were in the computer and no one was moving about it at that time. It didn't occur again. It's weird, but with technology, especially since I feel inadequate in anything technological, I write it off as some technical issue. But then also, because I have a worldview in which I find significance in the timing of all things, especially since we were talking about ghosts. I was also intrigued by Rosie's very alarmed reaction to it, especially because I didn't hear it while it was happening. In playing it back and hearing the very loud, scratch like interruptions, I can understand her disbelief. And perhaps this moment signifies something important in our conversation. Not only what was this mysterious sound, but why didn't I hear it? It's ironic this occurred during my discussion on ghosts in traditional Chinese medicine and why my Western education of TCM discounts the actual existence of it, despite the fact that there are clear, undeniable, unambiguous pointers to it in the ancient literature. Ironic because there is one side, in this case Rosie or ancient TCM, that clearly experiences a thing, and then another side, in this case me or modern medicine, that denies it. TCM actually has its roots in shamanic medicine, which experienced all afflictions to be spiritual in nature. Evil and demonic afflictions were common in the vernacular of illness, and traces of it are still retained in the classics on traditional Chinese medicine. As we modernize, beginning with Mao and the Cultural Revolution and continuing on to modern scientism, these ideas and concepts have been intentionally ignored, rewritten, and redefined over time. So now references to evils, demons, ghosts are all regarded as outdated and from a superstitious, less knowledgeable time.
And so it's like it's ghosts, but it's also illness, right? When you're talking about Chinese medicine, it's like, well, what exactly causes illness? And one of the words that's used in Chinese medicine a lot when people get sick is it's called evil, like you're afflicted with evils. And they translate it to a different word because we want to be scientific, but There's all
What did
these connections.
what did they translate it to?
Pathogens.
Oh.
I think that the word evils was communicated to us. That's how I knew about it. And I'm like, that's curious. No, no, let's not talk about that. It's just like when they didn't know anything, you know? Those backwards people that didn't know anything, but 2000 years later, we're just gonna milk it for what we think it's about and then reframe it for you, right? So it's like that. So
Yeah.
now I'm like, well, what's all this ghosts and evil and all these like really juicy things that have their roots in Taoism and ancient practices? And what do people know? What did people know? And what do people know that we refuse to acknowledge?
I remember being in TCM school some 20 some odd years ago and running across these terms and having a tremendous curiosity about them. I mean, wouldn't you? These curiosities were never indulged. They were uniformly written off as from a superstitious time before people knew what viruses and pathogens were. And I always thought it was interesting that there was no discussion about how an effective system of medicine had evolved and survived for thousands of years, and yet they supposedly didn't know what the origin of disease was. Is it merely a matter of semantics, where what was called evil qi is another word for a virus? And if so, why are we insisting upon our worldview? Why can't we retain the original understanding of evil qi or xie qi and say, well, we now see this in our reductionist and materialist worldview as a virus, but it was originally understood in a fuller cosmology of yin-yang, life and death connection, and continuation as xie qi or evil qi. Perhaps we can begin to see and understand how taking one word and overriding it with a modern view has the effect of flattening out and reducing the whole rich cosmology from which traditional Chinese medicine came about. This modern editing doesn't just occur around the idea of evil qi, it occurs around any correlations or associations of the body and health and healing that modern medicine can't make sense of or attribute validity towards. For example, all the correlations associated with organ systems in traditional Chinese medicine.
Well, the thing that I put together too, another thing when I was thinking about Chinese medicine and Ghost Month is that the beginning of fall is the beginning of the season of the lungs. And the spirit of the lungs is the Po spirit. And the Po spirit, so every organ has its own spiritual element, I guess. I don't know how to call it. But the Po is the spirit of the lungs that's considered more attached to the body, and that when the body dies, the Po clings to the body and returns to the body, versus the spirit of the Hun, which is considered more yang, which separates from the body and, like, I don't know if you believe in reincarnation, goes to reincarnate or goes to heaven or whatever, but it's considered the higher spiritual body. And the Po is considered like the lower spiritual body. And the Po is what becomes ghosts. And the Po is very attached to the earthly human realm of the body. And that's why ghosts, the idea that ghosts are attached spirits that haven't been able to leave or let go. There's some attachment to life here, is the Po. And so it's the month of the lungs and the Po, and it's Ghost Month. So I was like, wow, interesting, right? So then I was trying to, in my mind, discern between, I don't think I know enough yet, but when we pray to ancestors, are we praying to their Po, or the other spirit is the Hun, which is the spirit that moves on? So what exactly is happening? And it's interesting to think about the orphan spirits, which I think are the Po, because if you die from trauma, like Po is very connected to grief and sadness and pain and attachment of the human body and that sort of thing. And so that's why a lot of ghosts who hang out is associated with the Po. And so it's like, yeah, I guess spirits who have had suffering in life and who come at this time. But then are they different than the ancestral spirit of your grandma who was very happy and healthy and had a lot of wisdom and you just want to pray to her at other times, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So these things are interesting and I guess I just never really thought about it, but I like to think about it to have some clarity around it because I do think that in the West, especially because we don't think about it at all, we glom like ghosts and demons and spirits and everything supernatural, aliens all into one category,
Right.
you know? But it's much more, I mean, even in the history of Chinese medicine, I think it's much more sophisticated and understood than that. Just like there are different kinds of people on earth, there are all kinds of different kinds of
Right.
spirits and
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, the way that I hear people talking about it here, there is that nuance for sure, because it's not like in the West where the only conversation is, do you believe in ghosts? It's like everyone believes in ghosts. Like there's not even a conversation around that. There's already an acknowledgement of the spirit world. It's not a question. So the way people talk about spirits and ghosts here, I hear people talking about all sorts of different ways that spirits and ghosts are, and the ones that still have things to work out in this realm versus the ones that have attained some sort of, you know, I don't know, peace or something in another world. And, you know, when you go to Taoist temples, like you've seen, it's like whole pantheons of different sorts of spirits, and they're all different sorts of levels, you know, they're like the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and different celestial beings, and they're all sorts of like different levels of, I guess, like having attained some sort of like peace or enlightenment or something like that. But
Uh-huh.
it's very sophisticated.
Right.
It isn't like you're saying, just like
Aliens and Bigfoot. Well, I
yeah,
think
you've been hanging out with your grandma.
it seems to me that the flavor of Ghost Month is more Poe,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it feels like right now we're taking care of the ones that aren't being taken care of, have things to work out, and need special attention and care. This is their time to come out and be cared for.
After I talked with Rosie, I was thinking about all the different spiritual realms and how Ghost Month is a time to take care of the orphaned ghosts. It then dawned on me that, wait a minute, I wonder if in a higher spiritual realm, other beings were making offerings to us, like the unexplained luck and happy coincidences and near misses of misfortune were the effects of prayers and offerings from another plane. Perhaps ancestors that have reached a type of enlightenment and understanding trying to help me. Suddenly, my heart swelled with gratitude because, in many respects, I've had a very fortunate and lucky life, and I know it was not something that I alone made for myself. And almost as soon as I felt that gratitude, I immediately understood the importance of Ghost Month, of extending blessings and well wishes onto others, especially those that are less fortunate. I then could also understand in my heart the flow of yin-yang, of giving and receiving, of harmony and inseparable connection. In thinking about those who have passed, I think about my father who just passed away this past spring. I told Rosie about dreams I've been having with him.
Actually, this week I've had two dreams with my dad in it, which I had.
Oh,
I had that one I told you a while ago, but then I had one last night and then I had one either 2 nights ago or the night before. And the one I had 2 nights ago, I was on the phone with him. I don't think in either one of them in my dream he had died, but I was on the phone with him and there was a feeling of grief and sadness with him, and he was saying he's sorry to me.
oh,
And in the dream, I knew that he was sorry vaguely, that he felt sorry because he wasn't present or he wasn't a good dad or something. I don't know. It wasn't very clear in my dream, but I knew that that was the feeling of it. And then in my dream, I just felt bad for him and I said, it's okay. And I felt an urgency to tell him I love him, even though we never tell each other we love each other. That's just not a thing. Just don't say that, you know? But in the dream, it felt important for me to say it, even though it felt awkward.
Uh-huh.
And then I woke up and I was like, was that a dream or was it a visitation? Like I couldn't tell, you know?
Well, yeah. I
Right.
wonder if there's even a distinction or
Yeah. And then last night there was a dream that I was visiting him in Vietnam and I was going with my sister and my friend Rebecca and apparently we were going to go to Nha Trang, but he was in Saigon and he was asking us, is it possible for us to go to Saigon? Because he has to drive all the way from Saigon to Nha Trang to see us when we visit. It was a long drive for him. And in the dream, there was this conflict with my sister who thought it was annoying that my dad was asking that. And then me just wanting, like, why can't we go to Saigon with my dad? So it just felt like a lot of real life stuff like that in the dream. Um, and then I woke up and I'm like, that's weird. I'm dreaming about him again. I wonder if it's ghost month thing, you know? But both dreams I realize is the Po, like the sadness, the unsettled spirit aspect of him, you know,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
something like that.
When my father was dying, I flew to Vietnam to see him. Fortunately, I made it in time to say goodbye, and he passed away later on that morning. There was something about his passing that felt utterly peaceful to me, and his burial in the soil in his motherland of Vietnam. In Asia, one of the main reasons for ghosts is if they haven't received the proper funeral and burial rituals for their transition. This final act of filial piety for the deceased is necessary for a peaceful transition of the person from this realm to the next. While animists and Taoists and Buddhists and Catholics all have different ideas about what that next realm is, the understanding of the importance of a respectful ritual of transition is the same. During the funeral, we put on ancient funerary garb of white, and I reflected on the meaning of that in my conversation with Rosie.
And it's always been curious to me because we wear white, and I was like, oh yeah, that's the color of the lungs and the Po. I
Oh,
wonder if there's some back in the day, some connect. I mean, there must be some connection to that, you know.
so interesting.
I know, and I feel like all this knowledge is lost because the continuity has been lost. And so it's like, you know, when my dad died, I wore it's like very ancient white clothes. And I was asking everybody, why do we wear this? What's this about? And people don't know. You just do it at this point.
Yeah.
And there's like this square on the robe at the end sewn on, but it's like this flappy square that clearly means something, but nobody knows what it means.
The flappy square, it's also white.
Yeah, but it's like separate from the garment. So there's a square that you just sew onto the back, and there's no reason for it to be there. So it just feels like Chinese medicine to me, where I want to know where everything came from. And people don't know, you know, and I guess they're okay not to know because nobody is trying to know. It's just what you do, you know?
I think about the perpetuation of ritual and people not really knowing the origins. I don't think this is particular to Asia at all. Clearly, we do this in the West as well. How many of us actually know the true origins of Halloween, Christmas, Thanksgiving? And yet, collectively, our culture and seasons revolve around the acknowledgement, if not celebration, of these things. However, I think particular to Westerners, we tend to make collective celebrations individualistic, as in, I'm not really religious, but I just like the lights and giving presents, or I just use the holidays as a way to be together with family,
or I don't really believe in ghosts, Halloween is fun. I think in Asia there isn't really a concern with an individual rewriting of the rituals, although people do engage with collective rituals with varying degrees of knowledge, interest, and investment. I think also because of the very long and colorful history of China and its influence on other Asian countries, tracing back the meaning of a ritual isn't a straightforward path. Traditional Chinese medicine, for one, is not an easy road to trace back to its origins. With shamanic roots and different philosophical influences like Taoism, Confucianism, Buddhism, as well as social political influences of different periods, from the Shang dynasty through the Tang dynasty, through Mao to modern times, not to mention its exportation to foreign lands like America, a lot gets absorbed, a lot gets lost, and unfortunately a lot gets discarded. Throughout history, China tends to absorb all practices and knowledge into a mishmash of different influences that it is hard to tease out one from another, like what aspect of a ritual is Taoist versus Buddhist, is harder to characterize than an outsider would think. In Vietnam, even when Catholicism was introduced, many who practiced Catholicism retained beliefs and rituals in ancestor worship or animism alongside. Practices just became an amalgamation of different belief systems. In the West, while we refer to ourselves as a melting pot, our tendency towards Socratic rationalism, where irrationality must be avoided and everything must be justified, leads us to discard a lot of things we consider unscientific. Rosie talked a bit about this.
I think it all comes at the expense of having such a narrow window of what we call, I guess, like normal or healthy. Maybe that's a word, normal and healthy in the West. It's such a narrow spectrum. I'm thinking about my mom who was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And because she had contact with the spirit world, I could imagine her living in a different time and place and being valued and seen as like a medicine person.
Mm-hmm.
Because the ways that she saw me and communicated with me in her later years that I think other people would just call crazy were so, like, I don't know what the word is, but so exacting and piercing. Like she knew me and saw me so specifically. But because she lived in the time and place that she did, she was seen as a crazy old lady, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so it feels like it comes at a great expense of like what we can see and value and acknowledge in the West is so, so, so small compared to what the world, I don't know, I'm losing my words, but there's
No,
just
I
such,
mean, I get it. I think we find a hard time valuing anything that we can't explain. So that's very, very limited.
yeah.
Perhaps that's why I love traditional Chinese medicine, because our perspective is on the unseen, the ungraspable, the qi. We can't grasp qi, but we can see its effects, its movements, and we can attempt to redirect it towards harmony. The disappearance of this type of knowledge is something that I have anxiety over. I've been chasing a type of wisdom and knowledge that has felt elusive to me all my life, like chasing ghosts. In my own way, I think I've been trying to understand with a Western mind something that defies that type of categorical, graspable, linear way of thinking. And because of that, I hadn't realized that in a way, I myself have been living in a liminal space all my life, just like ghosts do. Neither here nor there, neither Western nor Eastern, neither Vietnamese nor American, neither practicing shamanic medicine or really traditional Chinese medicine or modern medicine. I don't quite really know what it all means, but I have really wanted to figure it out, like that white square attached to the funeral garb. It all feels so mysterious to me, ungraspable, yet pointing to something. There may be orphan ghosts unable to let go of the life they lived, and now I see that there are also living ghosts, us, unable to let go of something. We also have a longing. Maybe I can let go of that liminal space, that longing to know something that is ultimately unknowable,
to grasp something that is ungraspable, at least in the limited way that I have been wanting to know and grasp. Perhaps we can see Ghost Month as a time to acknowledge grief itself, to acknowledge our oneness with all of life, our connection to and compassion for all who have passed that are having a hard time letting go. They may be a reflection of us. And in this compassion, we can leave simple offerings of material life, things that will eventually pass anyway, that will end up in smoke and dust. But what will never pass is the mystery behind all this, the oneness that we have with all living beings, the love and compassion that can be our perpetual teachers.
Yin and yang, so true. Ancient wisdom, nothing new. Grief can't shake our view. We are one, me and you. In the darkest hour is the brightest light. Light. Surrender to the mystery behind day and night. No fear, just love from below and above. Ghosts and the living, to you I'm giving.
You're not scared of ghosts?
Part I'm scared of ghosts. But I feel like I'm not, even in just the latest experiences that I was telling you about, you know, the ways that like my mom has come to me since she's passed, I don't feel afraid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Feels very nurturing. I think before, where like we were talking about earlier, Bigfoot would be the same as like the spirit.
Right.
It's like I used to lump them all into one category. It feels like with the way I'm experiencing things, like having an increased nuance and understanding of different kinds of ghosts and spirits. It's like, sure, I'm scared of some ghosts, but maybe I'm not scared of all ghosts or something like that.
Well, it also feels like your mom's visitations, it's not like Poe visitations, you know? It's not based on grief and attachment, that type of thing.
Right.
It's a higher aspect of her communicating, you know?
Mhm.
And I think that maybe my childhood experiences has been around Poe ghosts, and so I'm scared of them.
Uh-huh.
Because I think that it's almost like they are, I don't know, is there a concept of hungry? What are hungry ghosts in Taiwan? Is there something like that?
Yeah, I think those are the ghosts that are being welcomed this month.
Yeah. So the Poe ghosts are unsettled and sad and
Right.
all that. And so then they affect humans in the same way, you know? So I'm
Mhm.
scared of them.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
wouldn't want them to be in my clothes.
I mean, I'm definitely not drying my clothes out at night.
But I also wondered, it's an interesting time to know about Ghost Month and to just connect to that. And, you know, the dreams I had about my dad, I was like, oh, it's actually very useful, you know, to connect to any unsettled parts of a relationship of someone that's passed on and to bless it with love or food or burn paper. Like it's just a way of sending good wishes to your loved ones, you know? I think
Mhm.
it's very useful thing to think about, especially with relationships that people haven't passed away peacefully, right? And I think here it's hard to talk about death, right? It's hard to know, like, do most people pass away peacefully? What is our experience of death here, right? But it would be a useful acknowledgement here, I think, if people in general just even contemplated about that. People who have passed in our own turmoil or unsettled relationship around it, and having a time where we send it healing, send it food, send it love, you know? Ghost Month is officially over now, having ended on September 2nd, but we are going into our fall season and have Halloween ahead of us. I hope this discussion of Ghost Month will inspire you this fall season to reconnect, heal, and pay homage to those who have passed, with special thoughts for those who may need our love and compassion to peacefully transition onto their next journey. Light a candle, light some incense, gather some flowers, leave some food offerings. But what may be more important than the things to do or the rituals you perform is to take some time to acknowledge in your hearts your connection to those who have moved on and offer them your love and kinship. That goes a long, long way for both them and you. Take good care, everyone, and thank you for listening to this podcast. Special thanks to my dear friend Rosie for being in this conversation with me, Daniel for doing all the back-end stuff, all the spirits who are praying for us, and Suno for the music in this program. This is Thuy signing off, and see you next time for another healing and thoughtful podcast episode on You Are Medicine.